this violence, we started our nonviolent resistance.
I think the importance of Extend is that it offers young American Jews a chance to do something which is very rare in the American Jewish community, which is actually interact with Palestinians.
All the time, our narrative has been spoken by different people and not us.
As my point of view, education is power. You don't need a gun, you don't need a grenade.
Coming on Extend gave me the vocabulary and the conviction to approach the conflict in a way that's more true to my Jewish values.
By breaking out of that cocoon, it allows young American Jews to humanize Palestinians. And I think that's extremely important for creating a more humane and constructive dialogue inside the American Jewish community about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Extend has given me the tools to go back to the big picture political conversations I've had in the States and talk about the real experiences of Palestinians and Israelis on the ground.
It's a lonely journey. You feel alone and small. How can you change the system? It's very hard. But a few people have to hold this vision of a different reality.
Hi, I'm Sam Sussman, co-founder and director of Extend, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome you to our third annual gala, Together Against Extremism.
And I'm Isaac Johnston, Extend's Jerusalem Program Director, coming to you from Jerusalem.
So for those of you who are familiar with Extend, welcome back. It's good to see so many friends and supporters and alumni in the chat here. We're really excited for the next hour and 15 minutes with you. For those of you who are new to Extend, Extend was founded in 2013 with a very simple aim: to bring the voices of Palestinians and progressive Israelis who are struggling against the occupation and for democracy and human rights to everyone, specifically to elevate these voices within the American Jewish community, where they are too often silenced and where those who actually share our values and who are doing the work on the ground to promote democracy and human rights do not have their voices heard loudly enough.
This year led 21 programs, 318 American Jews, including our new Gap Year Code, Study Abroad part of J Street U, Yeshiva and Rabbinical students, and our first family program. They've got extends Palestinian partners all across Israel, Palestine, some of whom you're hearing from shortly. Extends programs equip our participants with the knowledge, relationships, and most importantly, moral urgency to be activists against Occupancy. Our alumni have gone on to lobby their elected leaders, speak in their congregation, our organizations, Street U, Open Hillel, JVP, and If Not Now. Today, or tonight for me, we want to take you on a version of an Extend program, a virtual tour to Jerusalem, Ramallah, and Jaffa.
Great, and we're getting a little choppy on the recording. We're going to try to improve that. Hang with us. So we just want to say something about the overall political context in which we're gathering tonight. The Gala's theme is Together Against Extremism. As those of us who have followed recent events in Israel-Palestine know, it's been a dark and difficult time for those who care about democracy and human rights. In the latest Israeli election, we saw the rise of extreme right-wing forces, people whose beliefs are so extreme that previously they were barred from serving or running in the Knesset. We saw the rise of Itamar Ben-Gvir, a politician so extreme, so willing to embrace violence that on his living room wall, he has a photograph of Baruch Goldstein, the terrorist who infamously killed dozens of praying Palestinians in Hebron in 1994. These are the sorts of radical voices that are coming to power in Israeli electoral politics. And at this moment, it's more important than ever before that those of us who believe in democracy and human rights come together to celebrate and support Israelis and Palestinians who are doing the work on the ground of building a grassroots movement to achieve something different.
Before we start, we want to thank so many people for joining us tonight. We're going to be asking for audience participation throughout the day. So let's start with this. Just type your name, where you are, and one word about your relationship to Extend. Alumni, friend, partner, and one word to describe yourself. Activist, teacher, baker. For example, I would be Isaac, employee, and athlete. This is our third annual gala, and bring everyone together in the Extend community is the true beauty of the event.
Yeah, we really want to say, Isaac and I, we're going to bring you on this virtual tour. We're going to go to 4 locations within Israel and Palestine. You're going to get a chance to hear from a lot of our key partners, activist voices on the ground. But we're not just going to sit here and talk to you. Now, this is really a community event. This is the one event every year where so many people, alumni, supporters, partners come together. And we really want to hear from you. We always love the connections that are made in the chat and people who know each other from different places. So great. Okay, we're seeing, okay, wonderful. We're seeing lots of different alumni. We're seeing activists, folks from Israel and Palestine, folks from across the US. Wonderful. Great. It's really, really good to see so many of our friends here. So Isaac, we're going to lead folks on this tour here. And you and I, when we sit down and plan this event, we have to think about who is the voice that we want to bring? Who are the voices that we think are doing the most essential work and that we want to bring to our community? And tell us a little bit about Auda Hathalin, who we decided to make one of the keynote speakers tonight and who we're about to go visit in the South Hebron Hills.
For sure. So for those of you who joined us last year, you'll remember that Auda introduced us to his community of Al-Khair. And as Sam and I were thinking about who we wanted to highlight at this year's gala, we thought about the many amazing and prominent journalists and politicians and civil society leaders we've been so grateful to have at our galas. But the more we thought about it, and in this particular moment, the more we remembered all of the calls and emails we received following last year's gala about Auda's powerful story. We felt that we wanted to ask Auda back to our gala to tell us what happened over the last year in his community. Auda last year continuing to lead his community's grassroots struggle against the occupation, and it's voices like his from the ground. I couldn't be happier that Auda is back with us tonight and bringing us back to Al-Khair. So let's hop on the bus, drive down Route 60 from Jerusalem, and get to Al-Khair.
So Isaac, we'd have about an hour and 20-minute bus ride. And, if you were leading this program, you would be giving us a little background. And as we take just a minute to situate, we want to share a little background. This is Nick Kristoff's description of going to Al-Khair. Obviously for those who know Kristoff's work, he's, not someone who's considered, radically pro-Palestinian. He tries to keep a pretty, even centrist line, but he is someone who's very deeply concerned with human rights around the world. And this was his description of being in Al-Khair when he visited. And I won't read it out, everyone can take a look, but just to get us situated and give a sense of the community that we're going to visit. Okay, so as we head there, we just want to say about Zoom, we've done everything possible to make this run as smoothly as possible. But if there are slight issues or lags, just hang with us. We're going to put a YouTube video in the chat that is the same video that we're about to screen share. So screen share strength will be dependent on your internet. If you have a slightly slower internet and this video lags, just mute the gala, click on the link that we're going to put in the chat, and you'll be watching the exact same video on YouTube. All right, with that said, let's go to Al-Khair. Let's hear from Auda, who shared his voice with us last year, and we're so excited to have back again, giving us an update on the very difficult year that he had last year. Here we are.
Hi everyone, my name is Auda Hadalin. I'm from Al Khair village. This village, I born here. I'm 28 years old. I'm a human rights activist and also I'm an English teacher here in the village. Now we are in Khair. It's a Palestinian Bedouin village, like east of Yatta and South Hebron Hills. Also, like part of Masafar Yatta area. The people who are living here, all of them, like are refugees since 1948. We are living here next to exactly an Israeli settlement. Now we are in this place here, which is under immediate threat, like of demolition, like in any minute. This year is really the worst. I mean, I'm 28 years old, but I feel, like that I'm over 50, and most of that because of like what happened this year. Everything started 17th of January this year when, like we lost our leader, our teacher, Haj Suleiman. The Israeli police came here, like to confiscate 3 Palestinian cars. Haj Suleiman, as usual, he was resisting the confiscation. They really, like got angry, and what happened that they ran over him by a truck carrying 3 cars, and they pulled him under the truck 7 meters. So I remember the moment when I saw, like Haj Suleiman after this in the clinic, and it will be like stuck in my mind, like forever. Haj Suleiman was a big symbol for all the Palestinians. This is why thousands of Palestinians came to his funeral. We built this monument after we lost Haj Suleiman. I mean, like we built it in the place where he got killed. And what happened, it seems that Haj Suleiman is bothering the settlers, as they say, even like after he passed away. So they came twice and they were throwing like the garbage here inside. And one of the times also they broke, like all of this, like big tile here, where is his name and like the Palestine map. So the one time they broke it, and 2 times, like they threw the garbage. All of us, like are trying to do all the things which Haj Suleiman used to do, but we didn't succeed yet. Now we know exactly what he was doing. We thought when he was alive, we thought that it's something simple, but now we understood that what he was doing is something that none of us can do. Haj Suleiman was friend of everyone. He was really loves every people, all the people. He can talk with the children, hear from them. He was not arrogant. He was the best. But the question is like, did we get his justice here? Did we complain? But they told us, like the driver was with the police. So like we consider him, like from the team who were confiscating the cars. So there is no file against him. And we didn't get his justice yet. This year, it started with the lose of Haj Suleiman. After that, like everything got just turned, like upside down here in Masafar Yatta and all the area. This year, on May 4th, 2022, the Israeli Supreme Court made the decision to evict 8 Palestinian villages and to make all the area of Masafar Yatta is a firing zone, which means that these people in these villages will live the Nakba for the 3rd time. We are doing as much as we can, like to stop that, but it's not only destroying houses, it's really destroying lives of the people here in Masafar Yatta. There is, like a military training all the time, like in Masafar Yatta. They built, like 2 new, like camps for the soldiers who are, like training 24 hours in 2 places. I mean, like they do, like explosions, the tanks, the bulldozers, like all the tools which they are using, even like the planes, the helicopters, all the time, like they are moving. It's really hard for the people, and I mean, like, yeah, the situation was really bad, but now this year it's really the worst. We started to see this year that the Israeli civil administration started, and now they are following a new strategy of destroying the education by destroying the schools. Just yesterday, they came again and they gave, like a new demolition order, 96 hours for another, like a school in a different Bedouin village, like in the area, which is like Masafar Yatta. This means that this school, which is in Khashm al-Kam, will be also destroyed again in less than, like 96 hours, or who knows when. As one of the Palestinian teachers, when we saw that they are destroying the school, it was really painful for us. And I think they will destroy all the schools, like here in the area. And if they will do that, this means that the people here will stay without education. And it's really it's really hard. We know and we believe that by education we can do a lot, like for Masafri Yatta and for our communities, like in South April Hills. One of like the main problems which the Palestinians are facing, like here, especially like in South April Hills and Masafri Yatta, it's the settlers attacks. All the time the soldiers like are with the settlers to protect them. Like what happened just last week here, the settlers were like doing like a march for the second time, exactly from the middle of Khair, going like from the middle of the village, like more than 30 settlers. The soldiers like were with them. They were really ready, I mean, to do everything to protect them. Even like we don't believe in like violent resistance, but the soldiers all the time around, just like to protect them and allowing them to do everything they want. Something important that I should mention, one of the settlers is taking more Palestinian land northeast of Khair, and he's building like his chicken like farm on a Palestinian land. Palestinians didn't use that land because they got it prevented by the occupation, but now the occupation is allowing that settler to build and make a big farms, like for his chicken, for his sheep. It's really, like a big, like apartheid and like discrimination, like against the Palestinians who are living in Area C. As a Palestinian, like we really need people here to come to see the life here and to spread the words, because we want the people who don't know and who is supporting like the wrong side to know exactly what's happening here. To be honest, we achieved a lot, like through like the international like presence here. Now Khair, for example, my village, or like Masafri Yatta area in general, I mean, they are really known. More people know about like what's going on, and more people like acting for justice. So this is something really great, and we wish that like more and more people will come, and more people will be like interact like in this struggle. I mean, like to support the Palestinians here, because they really deserve like better situation than this. Thank you. Thank you. Shukran. Goodbye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Hey, Isaac. You and I have both been doing this activism for a long time, and it never gets easier to see what the occupation means in the daily lives of Palestinians. It never gets easier to look directly at the violence and land confiscation and human rights deprivations that Aude is leading his community in this grassroots struggle against. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here who's shocked by watching that video and learning what life is like in Khair. So you've brought a few hundred Extend participants just this year to Khair. Can you tell us, for everyone who's sitting at home and struggling with what they just saw, what is the conversation like afterwards? So much of what Extend is about, it's not just about going to upsetting places to be upset. It's about learning how to respond to that and integrate it into action and join a movement for something different. So can you tell us, if we were on Extend right now, what would the conversation be like?
Yeah, if we were on Extend, we would be sitting in the Khair Community Center. It's the third iteration of the community center after it's been demolished multiple times. And I think a theme that comes up all the time is really the heartbreak and despair that folks feel when they see Khair, and the dissonance between Khair and Carmel, the Israeli settlement right next to it. And something that is really difficult for folks is trying to reconcile those values of, this is a house in Carmel that I could have grown up in, that looks like suburban America. And then you see what is happening in Al Khair, where 99% of the structures have demolition orders on them. You know, one of our gap year student participants in the spring said, after being in Al Khair, where is the Judaism in this place? And that was really heartbreaking for me. And I think that is really the beginning of the journey on Extend, is learning and seeing for yourself what the occupation looks like, and then taking those values that you know so deep in your heart, and how do you put those into action with what you've learned and experienced on Extend.
I'm really excited to hear from our alumni panel later today, because we have 4 incredible young activists who went through the journey that you just described of spending time with Extend. And we'll hear their stories lately, but these are people who did not come from communities where people use words like occupation or Palestinian. And these people went through the journey of joining Extend, spending time with you on the ground, spending time with Auda and some of the other speakers we're going to hear from. And then, as you're saying, integrating what they saw with the values that they hold in their heart and turning that into action, joining this broader shared movement that so many people on this call are part of, to create something that is fundamentally more just and more human than what we just saw. So, you know, Isaac, I think when we're talking about Extend as well, and who it's for, we want to emphasize that, you know, we started doing post-birthright trips, and that was in 2013. And we've grown so much since then. We've run programs for gap year students, rabbinical students. We're starting to plan programs for synagogue congregations for this coming summer. We, this last year, ran our first family programs. And something we really want to emphasize to everyone who's joining us is that Extend is for everyone. It's not just for, you know, young post-birthright students. We still do that work, and it's important to us. But really having this experience of traveling with us on the ground, meeting people who share our progressive values, and then becoming part of a shared movement. And Rabbi Andrea London is just saying it's also for rabbis. I see her in the chat. For those of you who don't know Rabbi London, she's a tireless activist, and we're working together for a program in February that will bring 15 or 20 rabbis with us to meet our partners. So that's something that we really want to emphasize. Extend is for everyone. You know, reach out to us when you're traveling to the region. Where are we going next, Isaac? What's next on the agenda?
Well, Sam, you mentioned sort of that movement that our alumni are coming into, and that movement is crucial right now, particularly in light of last month's election. When there are many people who think what we just saw in Al Khair is okay, and are committed to deepening the racism and occupation in Israel-Palestine. But there are also amazing Palestinians and Israelis struggling for democracy and human rights. And so we're going to meet one of those leaders in Sally Abed. Sam, do you want to introduce Sally?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna go to Haifa, where Sally lives now, and we're really excited to have Sally. You know, look, these elections that just happened were so hard, not just because the extreme right came to power, but also because the traditional left parties in Israel did terribly. Meretz did not even pass the threshold. So for a lot of people looking to hope and for an alternative, eyes have now turned to the grassroots level, and the change is not coming from electoral politics at this moment. It's coming from those on the ground who are doing things differently. And Sally leads an incredible movement called Standing Together, which is the largest grassroots joint movement of Palestinian and Israeli activists. And something that's incredible about Standing Together is that it is intersectional. Its members can be found resisting the forced displacement of Palestinian communities in the South Hebron Hills and in East Jerusalem, but also campaigning for a livable wage, for LGBTQ rights, for an Israeli New Green Deal. So in this bleak landscape, Standing Together is really an incredible organization, and Sally is just an incredible leader who we're very lucky to have with us. So with that, Sally, I'm promoting you to panelist in the language of Zoom, and here we go. Sally, Hi,
right.
Sally. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Should I take it from here?
Yeah, well, let me ask you a little
You
bit.
have a question, yeah.
I shared a little about Standing Together, but tell us a bit more. What is Standing Together doing, particularly after this difficult election? What does your movement look like and represent?
Yeah, let me just start really first thinking about really acknowledging the moment that we have and the challenges we have. For me personally, just as a Palestinian, part of my Palestinian people, and thinking of the deepening, and the really increasingly hard and impossible situation that many Palestinians in the occupied territories will endure, in the upcoming years with the new government, and that have been enduring, yes, as we saw. And for me as a Palestinian in Israel, and what that means, to live as a native Palestinian in a Jewish supremacist, government, under a Jewish supremacist government, is going to be extremely difficult. It's also important to understand that, this new government will affect deeply already marginalized groups within Israeli society. It will make it very challenging for us to work. I think a lot of our spaces will be limited or dangerous, or at best hostile to work at. Standing Together works in local communities through local chapters. We work on student campuses, and student campuses are becoming increasingly hostile for Palestinian students, but also for Jewish students who dare to talk about joint struggle and dare to talk about anti-occupation efforts and peace efforts. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that, because I do think that, a lot of the time Standing Together really represents that hope. We're always on the move. We're always on the move. And with that being said, it is important for me to really acknowledge that it is also difficult, but we always say, if there is, as long as, there's always friction when you're moving, it means you're moving, right? The recent elections really, a lot of people are depressed with the fact that so many young people in Israel have voted for a very dangerous, racist, openly racist, oppressive government. And it's not a coincidence. Not standing together, excuse me, the Israeli public didn't just find itself in the right overnight. It was moved to the right methodologically and strategically through heavily funded movements and organizations and media outlets, funded a lot, mainly by the US organizations and think tanks and funds like Tikva Fund, for example. And we need to understand that, not only to demonize these kind of things, but actually to learn from them and look into it and really see how we can do it, but on the other side. How we can learn from this kind of organizing, how we can learn from this kind of paradigm shift that they did towards, a settler, Kahanist paradigm that's kind of almost normalized within half of the Jewish public in Israel. And how can we move it back? And yeah.
Well, look, I just want to jump in there and ask you, Sally, you've been in the US the last few weeks, and I think on this point, what Extend is so much about building these connections between progressives in the US and in Israel-Palestine. So what do you think we should be learning from the right in this sense? Because I really agree deeply with this point that the right has figured out this collaboration between the US and Israel much more effectively. What do you think we should be learning there?
It's not even about collaboration with the right, with the US. It really is learning two things. One, how to organize, and how to actually build power on the ground. And two, the political story. For a long time, there's no competition. When you have you usually have in politics, you have two main competing political stories, right? Of who's us and who's they, right? And if you really look at the Israeli politics, there was no competition. The left never had an us, a wider us of Palestinians and Jewish citizens of Israel that will work through joint struggle and work around issues that are relevant to people's lives. The right, on the other hand, had a very, very powerful story of us, political us, the Jewish people, the landlords. And it resonated with a lot of people, especially, and you could see that it's becoming stronger and stronger. And it's like tilting everyone to the right. The left, the previous, what is considered left, has become center at best. The center has become right. And all of this coalition, really, there's no competition. And that's what we need to learn, how to become competitive again. And I'm not saying that, it's very easy to, I always, when I talk strategy like that, it's almost taken out of, the emotions and the challenges and what it entails to do these things as Palestinian in Israel. To be competitive and being part of a joint struggle is not an easy thing. But we need to understand how we provide this new political story, this alternative. And we will do that also through building a new competitive story, political story of a wider us and a narrow them, and organize and meet people in their places. If you really look in the last 2 decades, the left has not really reached the majority of the social and geographical peripheries of Israel at all. It has been abandoned completely. And guess who voted in this new government? Mm-hmm. These people, the social, economic, and geographic peripheries. And now we have the opportunity to actually not isolate these people, but actually create conflict between these people and the new government, knowing very surely and very certainly that this government will not serve their interest.
So Sally, something that I think many people find really inspiring about standing together and about the joint struggle that you're describing is it's focused on a broader array of shared issues, labor, the environment, economic issues, and then also fighting racism and occupation. Can you tell us a little bit about what is that new story that you are telling that encompasses all of these fields of justice? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. I'll just say, the very obvious that, I always start talking and then I forget the obvious. The obvious, which is not stated enough, is that organizing the Israeli public is necessary to Palestinian liberation. Is essential, absolutely essential. We need to build the political will, the political capital within Israel to resist the occupation. That's essential. And I don't think a lot of the Palestinian solidarity movements, don't understand that, and they obviously overlook the Israeli public. And what does the Israeli public mean? What does that mean? Who are they? They are people with aspirations, with challenges. Many of them are in the economic and social peripheries of the Israeli society. Many of them don't have any political story that actually represents their interests, with increasing costs of living, with increasing unaffordable housing, with also increasing insecurity, income security, domestic security. We're really talking about a society that is not satisfied with the status quo. And it's also not, when we talk about the occupation, we never talk to them as their interest. We just expect solidarity. Now, someone who can't end the month in dignity, you cannot expect solidarity for him for Palestinian liberation. And nor should you, in a sense that it really needs to come from what is the interest of the Israeli public in ending the occupation, which is a very deep issue. So yes, we talk about a livable wage, which you mentioned, and I need to say, the livable wage campaign that we have been running for a while now, we passed it in preliminary vote in the previous government, and we're trying to do the same with this one. And it really is a campaign that shows this new majority, because you had Palestinians like me who demand not only my narrative as a Palestinian, as a native of the land, and as part of the the Palestinian people in the occupied territories. I'm also demanding my part in Israeli society as part of this new majority, and I'm asking people, let's raise the minimum wage for all of us. And that's such a powerful tool to, one, tackle racism, by the way, just through progressive causes that are led by Palestinians in Israel. It really is a very powerful tool to tackle racism. It's also strategic. Why is it strategic? Because we get to go to Bnei Brak and to Jerusalem and to the Mizrahi peripheries, and to actually talk with people about something that is relevant to their lives, that provides them with an alternative to the Kahanist, populist right agendas that they have been seeing. That's all they have been seeing. And we're able to provide them with a new alternative, a new political story that can compete and that can build power and unlikely alliances, and really break that dichotomy of, peripheries and center, secular, religious, Mizrahi, Ashkenazi, which we see has really cost us the election.
So I don't know if you can see the chat right now, but it is just, it's filling up with people who your words are really deeply resonating with. And I think, so much of what we hear out of Israel-Palestine is these forms of racism and extremism and indifference to the faiths of others who don't look like the person speaking. And what you're offering is just so profound in terms of an integrated and intersectional movement that is thinking humanistically about bringing together all of these different forms of justice and creating something different. And it's just, people are really responding to that. And I know from hearing about your trip through the US that people have really responded to that. And while you're here with us, I want to highlight, because a lot of people on this call are the sort of people who bring speakers to talk about Israel-Palestine in their communities or their congregations or their universities, whatever it may be. And I really want to highlight that, Sally's story is so incredible and the alternative she's providing is so profound. And she can only tell it to as many people as we provide the infrastructure for her to tell it to. So I hope, all of those who are thinking about what sort of voices they're elevating, think of Sally and standing together. And I'm gonna share a link in the chat. And Sally, unfortunately, I'd love to talk all afternoon. Unfortunately, we've got to wrap up briefly. Let me just close by asking, I'm going to share this link for signing up for Standing Together's information. Is there anything that you would ask of those on the call? How can we support your work? How can we be part of promoting this different story of Israel-Palestine that you are telling?
Thank you, Sam, for that very important question. As you said before, we are actually in the US right now. We were at J Street conference. We are also meeting with a lot of Jewish communities, but also a lot of progressive organizations that don't really work, don't necessarily work in Israel-Palestine. And I think one of the most important things that we need to realize now is how to impact the conversation in the US and really also break that dichotomy of pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. I think exactly now, because exactly the understanding of, building the necessity of building the political will within Israeli public, in order to work towards Palestinian liberation, you necessarily need to be pro-Israeli citizens. It's a connection, and vice versa. if you are pro-Israel and you are pro, the Jewish state, if that's what I think it resonates with many of the Jewish community in the U.S. If that's what you aspire for, you necessarily have to be pro-Palestinians and Palestinian liberation. And I think we really need to impact that conversation and really redefine what it means to be pro-peace and what it means to, work on the Israel-Palestine issue. And thank you for your important work. And please, Sam, I think just, did you share the link?
It's coming in the link. It's coming in the chat.
Yeah, and you're welcome to sign up. So you just stay updated with our work. Standing Together is really, it's going to play a very key role in the next 4 years. And we'd love to update you with what we're up to. And then we can also, continue thinking about ways we can collaborate as the movement and the communities, support communities abroad. So thank you.
Good. Sally, thank you so much for being here and bringing your message. And it's so optimistic in these dark times. And we're so glad that you could join us and be a part of this. And I think you've got a lot of new friends and supporters in this group and a lot of old ones who are happy to see you here. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope the rest of your trip goes well.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Great. Okay. Watching the response to Sally in the chat is just incredible. And Isaac and I want to take this moment to say, if you enjoyed this time with Auda and Sally and hearing their stories and their narratives, first, we hope that you'll come and actually spend full days with us on the ground in Israel, Palestine. You'll have much deeper and fuller conversations. And as mentioned, we're running programs for synagogues, for families, as well as for students. So please come and join us. We also hope that you'll help us support other people coming on our programming. So every year we hear from many, especially young American Jews who want to join our trips and don't have the resources. We are a small, grassroots, people-powered NGO, and we really want to ask for your support in helping us bring more people into this shared movement, hear voices like Auda, hear voices like Sally. We're going to send the link into the chat right now. And for those who are able to offer us support, I just want to say, we have hundreds of people who donate to our work every year. Last year, I think we had more than 500 people give to our work, and people are able to give different amounts. We have people who are able to give tens of thousands. We have people who give $18. Every single donation matters. Everything matters in being able to build a larger movement where, when a student reaches out to us and says, hey, can I come? I've been told a certain story and I want to hear what you have to offer. And we can say, yes, come on the bus. We're not worried about, the price of you joining us for a day, because we've got amazing people who showed up to our gala to give support for us to be able to do that education and grow our joint movement. So we really want to ask for those who are able to consider a contribution at whatever level is comfortable or realistic for you. And, we're here doing this work almost 10 years after Extend was first started, just because of people like you sitting home, watching this gala, hearing our story and believing that our work is meaningful and should be brought to a wider audience, and that this is a movement that has to be grown. So we really ask for your support, and we're just going to leave this up for a moment before we move on.
And as we're asking for your support, we want to share a little secret about Extend and how and what makes your donation to Extend go so far. Because you might be looking at this and saying, $500 for 2 days on Extend, how is it possible to bring somebody like that? And the answer is that every year, other organizations spend millions and millions of dollars to send young American Jews to Israel. And they conveniently forget to educate them about the occupation or introduce them to Palestinians and Israelis working to end it, like Sally and Auda. So what Extend does is simple. We organize a bus, stay with a Palestinian host family, and then enjoy Sheldon Adelson paying for many of our participants to fly home. So that's how you can send one person on Extend for a full day for $250 or sponsor a 2-day program for $500.
Great. And the nice thing about Sheldon is, can we say this, Isaac? I mean, he's like the gift that keeps on giving, right? I mean, he hasn't been with us for about 1.5 years now, but he very generously endowed Birthright with a lot of money, and he's still supporting Extend's work, even though he's not around to see the fruits of the anti-occupation activists that he is indirectly creating. By the way,
and maybe the Adelsons are seeing those fruits when they're cutting their donations to Birthright by $75 million.
That's right. They went from, I think, 100 million to 25 million. So tough times for Birthright. Speaking of Birthright, by the way, Extend was just profiled in Haaretz as an alternative to Birthright. We're going to put that article in the chat for those who haven't seen it. It's the story of our origins, and we'd love to share it with you. We already see donations coming in. Thank you so much. We see people asking how to donate by check. We will put that information in the chat as well. And we really appreciate everyone's support. We couldn't do this work without you. And we're grateful for your help in helping us bring voices like Auda and Sally's, who are just so often not heard, to a wider audience. Isaac, where are we going next?
Next, you're coming over to me, over to Jerusalem, where I'm coming from. And Israel claims that Jerusalem is the eternal and united capital of the state of Israel. And what's not included in that sentence, though, is that 600,000 Jews who live here in the city are citizens of the state, while the nearly 400,000 Palestinians are permanent residents without the rights accorded to full citizens. And this legal difference affects all aspects of Palestinian life in the city. Our long-term partner, Ahmad Muna from the Palestinian Educational Bookshop, will tell us about how this legal disparity has affected his personal life growing up in Jerusalem and the constant insecurity around his residency in his birthplace and his homeland.
Okay, great. Let's go to the Palestine Educational Bookshop in East Jerusalem, which, if you haven't gone, we'll tell you more after the video, but it's a special place. Let's go. Let's hear from Ahmed.
When I was studying, I was in England, and on my 6th year abroad, I was on a 2 weeks holiday from work. So I came to visit my family, and when I was here, I got ill. I was sick. So I went to the doctor to get treated, and like I have done in the past, I would use my health insurance card in the doctor's place in the clinic to get treated, and they swipe it, of course, to register me on the system. They swiped my card on that time, and it didn't work. They obviously refused to give me treatment just because my card was not working. But eventually I got nothing serious, and I got treated elsewhere. But I started to dig more into what was going on with me, why my health insurance card was not working. And from one office to another, eventually I ended up at the National Insurance Office, and they basically told me that I no longer exist. And I got to understand that it's because I have not been living in the country for the last 6 years. And they said they can put me back on the system if I go to renew my ID, because my ID was too old. So I went to the Ministry of Interior to renew my ID. And I started to understand what was going on. What was actually going on is that there is a law within the state of Israel that says if the center of your life was outside the country for 7 years, then the state has the right to take away your residency. Now, face value, objectively looking at the law, there's actually nothing wrong with the law, because if you live anywhere else and you leave that place, of course, you stop being a resident in that place. The only difference is that I don't have any documentation that will allow me to claim this residency back. And here I'm talking about the passport. If I was an Israeli with an Israeli passport and I have this residency and I went to live abroad for, say, 10 years, 12 years, of course, after 7 years, I will use my residency, but I will always have that passport, that citizenship, that I can always come back into this country and claim my residency back. What was going on here for Palestinians is if we lose our residency, we don't have that citizenship. We don't have that buffer, that extra layer of security that can bring you back to your home country. Because we don't have this passport, if we actually lose our residency, so eventually we lose the right to be here, and we lose the right to return to here because we actually don't have it to start with. In other words, we're basically temporary residents. We're not permanent residents in this country. As long as we're staying here, we can live here. But if you leave, we don't have that security. And that's one of the reasons actually that have led me to decide to come back here, because I want to live here and I want to live abroad. I feel home here. Despite all the issues and all the problems that are going on here in Jerusalem and in Palestine, I still feel connected to this place and to this land and to this culture and to my family and to this business and to a lot of other things that are happening here, even the hummus and falafel, than anywhere else in the world. And this is why I decided to also come back, because I don't want this right to be taken away from me.
Today, I am a third generation into running this bookstore. The idea of the bookshop started in 1986. It actually started by my grandfather and my father. My grandfather had inherited a shop from his family across the street, and he basically decided to open it with his father and make it into a bookshop. There was, in the early 90s, there was the Intifada going on, and the result of that was the Oslo Peace Accords that happened in 1993. There was an influx of various internationals who started, and expats who started to come and live in the city. Big journalists, NGO workers, diplomatic missions, and so on and so forth. And these people started to demand English literature on Israel-Palestine. There were a few books that made it into the country, but they were sold at Israeli book chains and booksellers and bookshops, but they also did not portray a Palestinian narrative. So we started to look for English books that speak about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict all over the world, but mainly from the UK and the US in English. And we started to import it. This is when we started to move our business into English bookshop. So to tell you a little bit about Jerusalem, is a city that has a population of just under 1 million, in which about 35% of us are Palestinians and the rest are Israelis. There are mainly two differences about being a Palestinian or an Israeli in Jerusalem. First of all, the passport or the citizenship. We are governed by the Israeli system, the Palestinians, but we don't get an Israeli passport, although we pay our taxes into this, to the state of Israel. So we are governed from every aspect by Israel in terms of paying taxes, in terms of house permits, building, schooling, education, healthcare. But we don't get citizenship, we don't get an Israeli passport, and therefore we can't also vote in national elections because we don't have this citizenship. The other more day-to-day basically difference or daily life difference is the kind of services that we receive as Palestinians in East Jerusalem compared to Israelis in West Jerusalem. Education, healthcare, housing permits, car spots, infrastructure, green spaces, parks, post office. So basically, although we pay the same amount of taxes as Israelis, we actually receive a minimal service when it comes to these services. There's about 1,000 classrooms missing in East Jerusalem. That's according to the Israeli municipality of Jerusalem. This will result into about 30% of dropout rates in schools, which means that 1 out of every 3 Palestinians in the street actually has not finished high school.
We obviously feel that Israel is actually doing us a lot of harm. We are under occupation at the end of the day, and this occupation has not ended since 1967. It's still going until this moment. And to see that there is a more American and precisely Jewish American interest in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and not only interest in the conflict itself, but actually in trying to understand a Palestinian narrative and see how we can solve this conflict based on fairness and justice, is actually very interesting for us Palestinians. I personally believe that Jewish Americans have a huge part to play here because of their influence, because they can actually decide or influence policies within the US and even laws and legislations. And they can perhaps influence members of the Congress or the Senate to stand up for things to do with Palestine, or for laws and announcements that will affect the area here. Hopefully people listening to me on this video would grasp and take this as something that they could be looking into doing or participating in, and influencing such policies that are not fair to the Palestinians. I think there's a lot more to be done.
It's always powerful hearing Ahmed's story. He's been a partner with us for so long. And I think, Isaac, that always hits me very hard because like Ahmed, I lived in the UK, we lived there at the same time, and we're the same age. And at the age where I had the freedom and the right to decide how am I going to build a life between and in all the different societies that I'm a part of or care about, Ahmed didn't have that right. And he had to go back and leave his life in the UK, or else risk losing the legal right to ever step foot again in Jerusalem, where he grew up, where his family is. I mean, something that's just inconceivable for all of us. So it's a really personalized example of how the different legal systems in Jerusalem affect Palestinians on a daily basis. And we're grateful to Ahmed for sharing his personal story.
Yeah, I mean, the bookshop is a 20-minute bus ride away from my apartment in Jerusalem, and it's really a world away. You know, similarly, the legal differences between my ability to live here in Jerusalem and Ahmad's ability to live just a kilometer or two away is so vast, and really speaks to the two different legal systems that govern us. And if you are coming to Jerusalem, the Educational Bookshop, I could not recommend it highly enough. It has every book under the sun about Israel Palestine. It's also a really great place to get a coffee. They have excellent hot chocolate, relax and take in the sights and sounds of East Jerusalem, and the sort of capital of Palestine. But for right now, we're gonna go across the checkpoint to Ramallah. And Sam, who are we meeting with next?
Great. So we're so excited to go to Ramallah, and we're going to meet with Fida Juris. Fida has been a good friend and someone involved with Extend for a long time. And she just came out with an incredible memoir that's getting a lot of well-deserved attention that she's going to talk to us about. So Fida Juris is a Palestinian author living in Ramallah. She grew up in Lebanon and Cyprus, the daughter of the Palestinian thinker and leader Sabri Juris. Fida's life has spanned the full spectrum of Palestinian fragmentation. She's lived in the diaspora, in Israel, and now in the West Bank. Her writings include several collections of Arabic language short stories, a contribution to the Breaking the Silence anthology, Kingdom of Olives and Ash, as well as Hakluv, The Cage, a Hebrew translation of her short stories that came out last year. Her most recent book, which I have right here, is Stranger in My Own Land, which she's here to talk about today. Now, this book tells the incredible story of how Fida, who grew up as part of the Palestinian diaspora outside of Israel, ended up actually being one of the few people, one of, I believe, the fewer than 10 Palestinians to exercise the right of return and go back to living in Israel. And it tells her experience of doing so. So she's going to tell you much more than I will. Fida, here I'm promoting you to panelist. Please join us. We're so happy to see you. And Fida, here we go. Hi, Fida. Hi, Fida. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Sam. It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Great to see you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you today. And I was very excited to hear the conversation so far, and especially also with Ahmed, who is also a good friend. The Educational Bookshop is actually carrying my book there. They are the sellers for the book here. So I'm very glad, and I feel I'm among friends.
Absolutely. You know, when I was at the Educational Bookshop a few weeks ago, and I saw your book there, and I got very excited, and I immediately took a picture and sent it to you. I said, "Oh, look, your book is here." So it's really good to have you here. Let's talk about this book. So tell us a little bit. What is the story? What is the family story that you are writing here?
Through a small stipulation of the Oslo Accords, some Palestinians, very, very few actually, were allowed back to their native towns or villages inside Israel if they had held Israeli citizenship before leaving. In the end, this boiled down to less than 10 people. So a very, very small, tiny number of individuals were actually able to exercise the right of return. Now, the right of return is obviously one of the solid and major tenets, of our conversation as Palestinians, and of our demands and aspirations for a just solution of the Palestine problem, the return of the refugees. My father was in exile. He was exiled from Israel in 1970 as a result of his political work. And I should say that we are from the village of Fasuta. It's a village in the Galilee. So he was an Israeli citizen when he left. In 95, and against all odds, my brother and I were born abroad. We had always been in exile, and against all odds, we managed to return. And listening now, Sam, to the presentations tonight or today, I grasp even more how complex this whole conflict is and this situation is. And one thing that kept coming to me is it was so complex for me to understand, even as a returning Palestinian. And so I decided to write this book to both tell the story of our family, of my family, and our experience in coming back, and also to narrate the story of Palestine through our story. So I'm hoping really that this book will be a one-book introduction to the conflict and to the situation for people who, know about it, but they would like to learn more, or, people who really want to kind of read from the A to Z. I intersperse in the book, I intersperse the historic information and progression of events with my family, with my own personal and family history, and what it was like to come back here and try to integrate as a Palestinian in Israeli society. So the difficulties, for example, that Sally spoke about very much rang true. And also after that, I made the decision to leave Fasuta and relocated to Ramallah. So I talk about essentially voluntarily living under occupation. I do that in the book as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think one of the most powerful parts of this book, and what I'm about to describe is excerpt in 972. It was just published 2 days ago. So we're going to put that in the chat and encourage everyone to read. But Fida, one of the most powerful parts of your story is that you come back to live in Israel. You're back near, in Fasuta, where your family has these generational, longstanding ties. It's your home. And then suddenly the Second Intifada breaks out. It's this very hostile political environment. And you have these descriptions of, what was it like going to work in an Israeli tech company where you were working, and the way that people treated you. And, tell us about that decision. Ultimately, you decide, actually, I'm leaving Israel and I'm moving to the West Bank. And as you put it, voluntarily living under occupation. Tell us about that. Why did you make that decision?
Yes, I will quickly say, Sam, just to tell everybody a little more of the story. I actually, as a child, I was 10 years old, and I lost my mother to this conflict. She was working in the Palestine Research Center, which belonged to it was an organization of the PLO in Beirut alongside my father. And after the Israeli invasion in 1982, there began a systematic process to erase the Palestinian presence in Lebanon. And pro-Israeli allies in February 1983 planted a car bomb outside the center, and it took the lives of my mother and several others. So you can appreciate what kind of violent and completely unsettling event this was in our lives. After that, shortly we left to Cyprus, and I continued growing up there. Against all this history, and with a father that continued to direct the research center, and growing up with Palestine in our home, I suddenly found myself in 24 hours, really out of nowhere. I came back and I was an Israeli citizen. I was granted the citizenship by virtue of the fact that my father had it. And suddenly I found myself having to live and to work alongside Israelis in a very hostile environment, even though it was more subtle and more nuanced. So, at the beginning, at face value, I'm going to these companies and I'm getting interviewed and I'm finding jobs and everything looks normal until I start working, and nothing at all is normal in the way people relate to me, in their perception of me, how they see me. In 2 companies that I worked, I happened to be the only Palestinian among tens of Jewish Israelis. And the reason was my English. Otherwise, they would not really have thought to hire me. And so it was a very, very jarring, very difficult experience. I was trying to come to terms with our return and understand myself in this, hostile, discriminatory environment that I found myself in. And at the same time, I had to go through the motions of starting a life there and earning a living and doing all the things that you normally do when you move to a new place. And this was what ultimately pushed me away.
Yeah. Fida, it's such a powerful story. We've put the link in the chat. We can't do justice to this in a short conversation. I just want to say, Fida has very generously and hospitably taken me to Fasuda, which she describes in the book, and I met her father, who's an amazing and inspiring activist and thinker. So for me, reading the book, the characters are all very real, and it's an incredible world that you bring us into, Fida, and really an amazing family story. And it's such a tribute to the multi-generational struggle in your family to find some form of normality and justice within this broader, protracted conflict, which cost your family so much. So I can't recommend the book more. I hope everyone gets it. And Fida, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about your story. And we're going to put, Fida has said that we can put her email in the chat. She's going to be doing a US book tour next year. So for those of you who are thinking about what sort of voices you want to elevate and bring into your community, if Fida is, she's going to be here next year in the States, hopefully, and really someone who I think you see, even in this short conversation, has an amazing story to tell. And I hope everyone in this call can help in their own way in bringing that story more broadly.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you for having me with you in the Extend Gala tonight. And I'm really very, very thankful to the work that you're doing, very valuable work, and I wish you all the success. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon in Ramallah, Fida.
Thank you.
Take care. Good, Fida, we really appreciate Fida joining us. We wish we had more time with all of our speakers. Our last event is the alumni panel. We're very excited to hear how people who have spent time with us on the ground have started to use their experiences and become part of something different. But before we go there, we just want to ask one more time, if these voices have been meaningful to you, to hear these stories, what Sally called the alternative story, we really want to ask for your help in bringing more people with us on Extend next year. We really want to ask for your help in bringing our work to more people next year. We're very grateful to everyone who has donated. We see donations coming in. It's going to make a big impact in our work next year. And look, we really just want to say the right is not winning on Israel-Palestine because people share their values. If you look at the polls of what Americans and what American Jews believe, our progressive story, the story that Sally is talking about, is much more popular in people's hearts. But as Sally was talking about, the resources that the right has put in to promoting their story has far outstripped what those of us with more progressive values have been able to do. So, we ask for your support in bringing the voices that you've met today to more people. We know, last year we went from bringing about 230 to 320 people on our programs in the last 2 years. And that was because of the giving at this gala last year. But we know that 300 people is a small fraction of those who want to come on our program and hear the voices that you have heard today and be part of the movement that we are building and joining. So for those who are able to give a donation of whatever amount, we'll just leave this here for a second. The link is going into the chat, and we'll be very grateful for whatever you can give to push our work forward. All donations are tax deductible. If you want to give by check, you can just ping us and we'll send you that information as well. We're just going to leave this here for a moment, and we really appreciate all of the support in helping grow our work. Isaac, as we leave this up here for a moment and we transition towards the alumni, We've been doing a lot with alumni this year. Tell us a little bit, and that's really the core of our work, right? I mean, Extend, it's an educational experience, but the point is that people who come with us transition into forms of activism and advocacy, and they use the experience to try to change the situation for the better. So tell us, what have we been doing with alumni this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've really started to create a real alumni community and building that sense of community from the second that you end your Extend program to when you go back to where you're from and where you're trying to get involved in another movement in the diaspora. And one way we've been doing that is we've had our first alumni board that's dedicated to bringing their unique voice as alumni of the program to Extend for community building and advisory roles to make Extend the best place it can be. In fact, one of those initiatives from the alumni board is our alumni ambassadors program, who will be the first point of contact for people coming off of our programs to get plugged into our community. Right, we're building a movement towards this just, free, and dignified future that Sally has been talking about, Auda has been talking about, Ahmed's been talking about, Fida has been talking about, and our alumni ambassadors will welcome our new alumni into that movement with a phone call or a coffee. Julia, who's been active in the chat, has been spearheading that along with Josh Bloom, who's also an alum of ours. And so if you're interested, if you're an alum, if you're interested in getting involved, reach out to Julia or Josh. And then we can really we can continue building that movement of alumni and community. And you know, Sam, you mentioned how Extend is for everyone, congregational trips, family trips. And if you come on those trips as well, you're a part of that community. The rabbinical trip that's happening in February with Rabbi London, you know, creating a community of diverse ages and experiences and understandings of this place is how we will build a better world.
Yeah. Isaac, okay, thanks so much for giving us you know, that overview of what alumni are doing. We hope if there are alumni in this call that you'll reach out if you want to be part of the ambassador group as well. That's been growing. We're going to go now and hear from alumni. We have 4 incredible folks who are joining us, and they're all on their way in. And Isaac, do you want to tell us who our 4 alumni are as they join us?
For sure. Yeah, these 4 folks I've had the absolute pleasure of working with and meeting and getting to know over the last year and a half. They've all participated in some of our newest programs, whether that is on our inaugural gap year cohort, or programs for yeshiva and rabbinical students, or for study abroad students here in Israel, Palestine. And it's so amazing, Abby and Caleb and Mira and Tal, to see you with us. And so I just want to, I know y'all and you're amazing. You're all amazing people, but I want everybody else to get to know you. So let's just go Abby, Caleb, and then Mira. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you, Isaac. I'm so glad to be here, and this whole gala has been so illuminating so far. I'm Abby. I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland. I currently am a freshman at Princeton University, and I was a part of Extend's gap year cohort last year when I was on the Nativ College Leadership Program in Israel for my gap year.
Hey everybody, my name is Caleb Bromberg. I'm a rabbinical student at JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. It's the conservative movement school in New York City, although currently I am coming from down the street from Isaac here in Jerusalem. And I went on the Extend trip this past November, I think. And that's my connection.
Hi, I'm Mira. I went on a bunch of Extend trips last year. I'm currently in second year in a dual BA program between Tel Aviv University and Columbia University. So there's a bunch of extend trips with Tel Aviv University kids that I'll talk about later, but I took part in a lot of those last year. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tal. I, along with Abby, was on Extend's first gap year program. I'm currently a first year at the University of Maryland, and I'm really excited to share with y'all.
Amazing. It is so great to see all of you, and thank you for coming, especially for those of you who are in finals season. I know it's quite stressful. So how about, yeah, can you tell us about your story? Why did you go on Extend? What stuck out for you, and how has it stayed with you since coming on Extend? Let's maybe do reverse order. So Tal, and then Mira, Caleb, and then Abby.
So I know we just watched that video from Ahmed. My first Extend trip was to East Jerusalem, to the educational bookstore. And I think one of the most impactful moments was like hearing the tone and seeing the expressions on Ahmed's voice when talking about losing his residency. My parents made Aliyah, moved to Israel when they were like a young couple. I was born in America, but because of their moving, I've been a lifelong citizen of Israel. And as I was sitting there watching Ahmed recount this heartbreaking story of potentially losing his residency and like in his home, there was just this undescribable feeling of horror at like how have I, who only started living in this country in my gap year, have the right to come whenever I want with my Israeli passport, and this person who's lived here their whole life, who's immersed in the culture, was facing losing their residency. Yeah, for a little bit of background on me, I grew up in the Modern Orthodox community, and I'm still very involved with it at the University of Maryland. The Modern Orthodox community tends to be very heavily religiously Zionist and unaccepting of criticisms to Israel. I have several friends in the army right now. So as I was coming back from that day at the educational bookstore in East Jerusalem, I was coming back to my religious Zionist seminary, where if you stick your arm out the window, your arm is over the green line. And I think it creates this really heartbreaking dissonance between seeing the realities of how Palestinians are living, like literally out my window. Yeah, and I think that was a lot of my experience with Extend, and a lot of the ways for me that is manifested in my day-to-day life as like I've turned those experiences into action is through conversation. So conversations with my peers and conversations with my parents and conversations with my educators about Israel-Palestine is important to all of us. How do we manifest how that's important and balance that importance with the importance of human life and human dignity?
Great. I guess I'll go next. So I think one of my really core Extend moments, there's actually two I'm thinking of, but I'll mention one in particular. I also went on a similar East Jerusalem trip, and I also visited the educational bookshop, which is fantastic. Everyone should go. Anytime you go to Jerusalem, it's a must visit. But this one, on that same trip, I heard a lecture from two representatives, actually the two founders of this organization, really fantastic organization called Military Court Watch. And their job is to basically monitor the functioning and everything that goes on with the military court in the West Bank. And, something that was, I'll say, kind of talking about my personal background, I grew up in a community that I feel, it's like everything that I am today is because of the community that I grew up in. And the way that the military court and like the surveillance apparatus functions in the West Bank, particularly in places like El Khair, like that you watched the video of, the surveillance apparatus really serves to create to break apart community and to breed distrust in community. And, you know, a lot of that happens through arresting minors, like, you know, kids as young as like 12, you know, 13, 14 years old, and people grow up in fragmented communities. And for me, this was like particularly hard to listen to. I felt like it is just like simply the least, I mean, I feel very Jewish, and I feel that like it is like just simply the least Jewish thing to do, to break up a community. And that really hit a nerve for me, and it's like really, really stuck with me. And yeah, I'll like say more about my like, kind of where I came to extend from. I mentioned, yeah, like I grew up in the US, also in Maryland, in a pretty progressive Jewish community, a Dach Shalom Reconstructionist community, shout out if anyone's watching. I ended up moving to Israel, Palestine when I was 16. And I actually went to this international boarding school that Isaac worked at, so small world. Givat Chaviva International School, it's definitely worth a Google search. And that was very, you know, the premise of the school was very much like, you know, coexistence between Jews and Palestinians within Israel. And being there, I felt totally immersed. And I felt like, wow, this is like, we're making peace happen. And the entire time I was there, we really didn't talk about occupation. And that kind of goes to show you how, like, and also if you are or are not familiar with Kibbutz Chaviva, it exists on like the left of the Israeli society. And that kind of gives you an idea of like what the idea of occupation is on the left. Yeah, the link for Kibbutz Chaviva was just in the chat. Definitely check it out. But again, like how occupation is viewed on the left is not always like what we might think of in the US. Like it's not as part of the conversation in the same way. And I think that's really like, that's an important thing to think about. And yeah, just kind of how Extend has changed my trajectory in life. Like I said, I'm currently at TAU, Tel Aviv University. And this past year, I started working as a fellow for J Street, which Sally also mentioned. Really interesting organization, great organization. And I work a lot with Isaac and bringing Tel Aviv University students and American undergrad study abroad students on Extend programs. And so kind of my role has shifted in a way, and I'm really part of, you know, something we were talking about is kind of like helping people process Extend. And something that Tal mentioned is, you know, growing up with like a certain idea of what Israel is and or what Palestine is or isn't. And being able to have conversations with people and just hearing them like just like process things and experience things in their own way has also been really meaningful for me. And it also kind of, you know, in the political climate, like the current political climate in Israel can seem depressing. And it kind of is, but also it's also not. And there's also things to really be hopeful about. And like the thing, like what Extend is doing is like, I actually just came from a conversation with someone who didn't know what J Street was and didn't know what Extend was. And we talked for like you know, an hour. And she just said like, wow, like I just had no idea. And I just think that's just a really good example of like, there are good things happening. And there are things to invest in, and Extend is one of those things, and J Street's one of the things. So yeah.
Hey everybody. I went on Extend because a big part of what I wanted to do while I was here in Israel, Palestine, as a rabbinical student, I'm here on my kind of required year trip with my school, and part of what I wanted to do was see the occupation with my own eyes. And somebody suggested I hit up Extend, and that's what I did. And here I am, and they really provided that opportunity in a deeply meaningful and deeply impactful, really approachable way. All of the above. And there are two main stories that really stick with me that I'll tell very quickly. We went on a trip over Sukkot. Sukkot, if you're not aware, is like one of the major Jewish holidays. It comes right at the end of what's called the high holiday season. It is the last high holiday of that season, and it's a big deal. Part of what we do during Sukkot is we build what are called Sukkot, which are those like booth-like structures that some people have in their yards or their garages or their roofs. The whole point of those is to be impermanent. They're supposed to be part of what we're investigating in this holiday is our relationships to permanence and impermanence, and this kind of symbolic throwback to the days when the Jewish people were traveling in the desert, when we would stay in things similar to Sukkot. And when we visited Al-Khair, and there's this massive, like, bougie suburb looking settlement called Carmel surrounding this village. And on the porches of these massive houses of the settlement are Sukkot, these religious, symbolic, spiritual artifacts that I take very seriously, are juxtaposed very immediately with what really look like Sukkot in Al-Khair that were just thrown together, that look and feel impermanent. All of them have a demolition order on them. It was devastating. It was heartbreaking and devastating, and like really made me wrestle with my own relationship with that holiday in a really meaningful way. And when we visited Silwan in Jerusalem, it's a Palestinian neighborhood in Jerusalem, and Silwan is situated like in part of the Nachal Kidron, the Kidron Valley, which is where pilgrims, Jewish pilgrims in like temple times, would like walk up to the temple. Like that's where it would happen. And it's a Palestinian village now, and that street where people might walk up to the temple was blocked off. Why was it blocked off? It was blocked off because of Sukkot. It was blocked off because they didn't want Palestinians on the road on Sukkot, because it was more important. It was more important that Jews, the gazillions of tourists that descend on Yerushalayim, on Jerusalem, during Sukkot, it was more important that they get the use of space and the illusion of conquer and security. It was more important for them to have that than it was for the folks in Silwan that we were talking with to be able to access their house. That crushed me. I was like, this is supposed to be the Chag, the holiday, the coming together of everyone, and everything just feels so disparate and so separate and so heartbreaking. So that's what I'm taking back from Extend, and they really gave me that opportunity in a way that I wouldn't have had before. I'm so grateful, and I'll continue wrestling. I'll continue being challenged, and I'll continue challenging, and that's what I'm taking back to the States. So thanks.
So I guess I'll go now. I just hearing Tal and Mira and Caleb, like every single thing that they're saying has resonated with my Extend experience as well. But my Extend experience was honestly like so transformational. I don't think my gap year would have been, I don't think I would be the same person now without the Extend trips that I went on. And I actually want to touch on one of the things Hallie mentioned about appealing to the economic and geographic peripheries of Israeli society. As a part of my gap year, I volunteered at a place called Yamin Old, which is a youth village for youth at risk in Israel, mainly for immigrants from Ethiopia or the former Soviet Union. So very much the economic and social peripheries of Israeli society. And some of the things that I heard, I was just in shock from my own students. I had heard some just really racist things come out of their mouths. And that was kind of when I started to realize that it starts at youth, like with the youth and with education in Israel. And there's just like this very systematic and ingrained like upbringing to not, to kind of not be racist, but to not talk about injustices, and particularly around vulnerable populations. And I think like I was really involved with youth activism and getting high schoolers involved in my own high school in Maryland. And so then when I saw that with Isa Omra in Hebron on an extend trip, I think that like really spoke to me, and I saw a lot of my own experiences there, and that also helped me synthesize a lot of what I was seeing in the youth village that I was volunteering at, which he was kind of working towards the opposite of almost what I saw at the youth village, where these at-risk populations were kind of using racism as a coping mechanism, whereas in Youth Against Settlements, Isa Omra's organization in Hebron was mobilizing these kids, these teenagers that were growing up in occupation in Hebron, in like the microcosm of the occupation, mobilizing them to use that to fight against the occupation and against injustice. And that it really spoke to me, especially since I had been very involved in activism efforts among youth here. And when it came to Israel, that was always kind of like a out of sight, out of mind subject. I mean, I grew up in a weird conglomeration of background. Like my parents are Israeli, but I went to public school, but I was also very involved in institutional Jewish life. I taught at Hebrew school, and I did like all kinds of youth things. So lots of different contexts. And the subject of Israel and occupation really just never came up, and I kind of didn't want it to come up. I didn't feel equipped to talk about it, and it felt daunting, and it felt like, oh, like not my problem. But after going on the extend trips, I feel very much so that it is my problem, and I feel very much more equipped to talk about it, and I feel much more prepared to engage in conversations about it. I think if I hadn't gone and just talk to these Palestinian activists, talk to Isa Omra, gone to Yusuf Humund and Al Khair, like if I hadn't done all those things, I wouldn't have the moral imperative to engage in conversations about it here. And I mean, it really has had a direct impact on my college experience, like because of a lot of the experiences I had on Extend. I'm taking Arabic, and like I don't think I'd be taking Arabic if I didn't do that. And I'm in, a group called the Alliance of Jewish Progressives, and I'm just trying to engage as much as possible. And I'm also trying to get like the institutional Jewish life at Princeton more in tune with the conversation around the occupation. And yeah, and I have Extend to thank for that. And I think I also am able to grapple a little bit more with like my own Israeli American Jewish identity in a much more comprehensive way.
Wow, thank you all so much for bringing your full selves. I'm just so honored to know all of you, count you as my peers and my friends, and to know that you are part of this Extend alumni community and growing Jewish community, who won't check their values at the door, who bring their values and their full selves into every space that they know, and who demand that their institutions and their communities reflect those values of justice and freedom and liberation. So again, I want to thank y'all for taking the time during a busy season. And again for taking that first step of coming on Extend to begin with, and now being amazing ambassadors for Extend as well. So I know we've gone a little over time, unfortunately, and thank you all for the folks who have stayed with us. We really appreciate it, and I think you heard the impact that you have of being able to bring Abby and Caleb and Mira and Tal on our programs over the last year, and so thank you again for everyone who has donated and who will donate as we continue and close out the year and the night.
And Isaac, we just want to say in closing, we only really had time to hear from 4 alumni, but this year you ran programs that brought 318 people on our trips. Right, 318 people who were exposed to what everyone saw today with the speakers and the activists. We have some alumni saying I was one. And to me, we know that we're in dark times with the rise of the extreme right. But what gives, I think, a lot of us hope is this feeling that people are unafraid to look at the darkness of the situation and speak their values and say, this doesn't reflect the society that I want to be a part of, and I'm going to be part of changing this and speaking out against it. And for us, it's really about creating a community of people who can all do that together. None of us can do it on our own. So at this point, Extend has brought more than 800 people on our programs, and we're continuing to build this movement. Our alumni are our best ambassadors through their word of mouth. So we have programs coming in the next year for rabbis, for families, for synagogues. If you want to come and travel with us and meet our speakers and go through our programming to become advocates and activists like the amazing alumni panel that you've just heard from, please reach out to us, join us. And in closing, we also want to say, we want to bring more and more people like this next year. We want to come back to you next year and say that we brought 500 people. So we're going to leave you again with the information for donating, and we're going to leave you with a little music. And we really want to thank everyone who came and joined us today. Extend it's all about the community that we're building, and we're really, really grateful to you for being a part of that. And reach out to Isaac or I with thoughts or questions or ways that you can be involved. And we're really grateful to everyone who made the time to join us today.
Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution sounds this way. Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution sounds like this way. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds this way. Who are people gonna rise up, get their share? Who are people gonna rise up and take what's there? Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Oh, I said you better run, 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 run. It's finally the tables are starting to turn. Talk about a revolution. It's finally the tables are starting to turn. Talk about a revolution. Talking about a revolution, standing in the welfare lines, crying to the doorsteps of those armies of salvation.